Welcome back to the Sports Management Podcast. This episode is sponsored by Insport Education and their new online course, The Foundation of Sport Business. With course modules delivered by sport business experts at companies like the NFL, the Football Association, and Formula E, the Foundations of Sport Business course equips you with everything you need to know to get on or accelerate your career in sport. And for you listeners, I have a great deal. With the code Sports Management Podcast 10, you will get 10% off the course price. Click the link in the description below and sign up to the course today. Now, let's kick off the episode. Welcome to Sports Management Podcast, where you will hear interesting sports management professionals share their stories, experiences, and passion for the sports management industry. I am your host, Marcus Philipsson. Today's guest is a sports executive with a decade of experience from the field of anti-doping. During his time at USADA, the US anti-doping agency, he had several roles such as director of UFC and Premier Sports. Today he serves as the executive director for Innovero Global, a company that has produced a sample collection equipment, who recently got their NSF International certification. Welcome to the Sports Management Podcast, Gabe Baida.
Thanks, Marcus. Appreciate the opportunity to come on.
So glad to have you here. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. So, you have a long history from the field of anti-doping. If we start at your time at USADA, how did you start working there and what were you doing?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I don't think anyone, ever really goes to school or plans to work in anti-doping. And in some ways I just fell into it. And, a decade plus later, I'm still here working in it because it's a great industry, and two, the work's very important, obviously. But I came into USADA at really the ground level. I finished up school and was able to find a job at USADA and learned really the ins and outs of anti-doping by working through various positions at USADA, and obtained a lot of great experience and was able to hold a number of jobs and responsibilities while at USADA, with my final one being, as you mentioned, the director of the UFC and Premier Sport division within the organization, where, I got to oversee USADA's first professional sport anti-doping program that they ran. So, obtained a lot of really, really good experience through that opportunity. And then, in the last 18 months or so, have been able to transition over to run Innovero, our new sample collection equipment company.
Yes, and we will talk more about Innovero and your great product later on. But talking about the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, they took a big initiative in starting working with USADA, and they have really made an effort to clean up and strengthen the integrity of their sport. So with regards to you and your work, what did you do in your work with the UFC?
Yeah, I think taking a step back, the UFC USADA, I think collaboration partnerships are a really good success story. And I think the UFC should be commended for, one, identifying that they had a bit of a problem with PED use in their sport and ultimately wanting to clean it up and putting in a strong and fair program that did so. And they recognized, pretty early on, they couldn't promote and police their sport. So once they developed the strong rule set that they did, and handing over the administration to USADA and have it being independently administered by USADA, I think, ultimately set them up for a lot of success, for a lot of benefit, and being able to improve the overall image of their sport. So, once they handed that rule set and administration over to USADA is really where my responsibilities lied, and just overseeing the general day-to-day operations of that program, and it being a truly global program. And if you follow that sport at all, you see, there's one weekend they're running an event in Abu Dhabi, the next they're in Singapore, the next they're back in Las Vegas. So it is an incredible promotion with a lot of great people that work unbelievably hard to make sure that they're putting on incredible events every weekend. And anti-doping is a big part of that promotion at this point, both from an in-competition and out-of-competition testing standpoint. So, as the director of that program and overseeing the anti-doping program, obviously making sure that the testing program ran as smooth as we possibly could, making sure no advance notice testing was employed, making sure that we're working with the various regulatory bodies that oversaw the licensing of the sport in the respective jurisdictions was really important as well. So And then overseeing the team of people that we had working on that program was great. I mean, much of the success that we had while I think I was involved with overseeing that program was, one, the team that we built to run the program, and then also the relationship and collaboration that we were able to establish with our counterparts over at the UFC. I think made for a very healthy partnership, but importantly, in a independent partnership as well, because again, they understood the importance of not being able to promote and police their sport at the same time. So being able to hand over, the reins of the program to us to run was really good.
Talking more generally about anti-doping and the integrity of sports, since you have worked in it for over a decade, like how important is the integrity of sports from a health perspective, financial perspective? I mean, we're talking about the UFC. If one athlete is on performance-enhancing drugs and another one is not, that could have health implications on the clean athlete.
Yeah, I mean, it's critically important, regardless of the sport. I mean, if we're going to look at it strictly through the lens of, my UFC responsibilities, that was front and center day in and day out. And I think it was kind of common knowledge that UFC was a bit different of a sport because it's a combat sport. And you have two competitors that are physically trying to hurt each other. And if one is, using PEDs and chemically enhanced and the other is not, the health implications are significant. So anti-doping is critically important regardless of the sport, but it is especially important given kind of the nature of combat sports. And it's not just UFC, obviously. I mean, you have plenty of other combat sports where, injuries happen as athletes are competing against each other. So it's really, really important in making sure that we can provide it as level as a playing field as possible. It was front and center day in and day out.
Yeah, for sure. And a sport that is not a combat sport but still has issues is cycling, and has for a long time. I mean, from the early 2000s with the Lance Armstrong case moving forward. Do you think that there is a way to change the perception of cycling from the PED standpoint?
Yeah, I think so, and I hope so. I mean, I don't think anyone would be working in the sport integrity, anti-doping space if they didn't think there was a positive path forward to improve the overall landscape of doping in sport. And, cycling is obviously an interesting sport that has a lot of history, but I also think there's been a lot of positive steps since the Armstrong years. The Independent Reform Commission and some of the steps they've taken to improve governance and independence, should be noted. I also think that sport's interesting in that just it has so much history that it may be a bit of product of time too, that, in order for image and brand to improve, you need to continue to take the positive steps that they have taken and continue to focus on rooting out PED use in their sport. But I think there's been a lot of positive steps that show that there are people who want to see change in that sport. And other sports as well. I think there's, a lot of really great steps that have been taken. You see it through the implementation of some of these integrity units and whistleblowing resources and involving law enforcement and special investigative units that have been established, which I think are really strong positive steps that bolster the overall sport integrity anti-doping initiative.
What your company Innovero has done is to construct a new sample collection equipment. And for everyone who has seen the documentary Icarus or is aware of the Russian doping scandal in 2014, they will understand the importance of your product.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, our company Innovero was certainly born out of the Russia doping scandal. And I think there was, some serious issues that were identified with the industry standard equipment that was pretty much used by everyone in the anti-doping space. And it really reinforced to us the importance of having high quality, highly secure, highly tamper evident sample collection equipment that we can offer to organizations and that athletes can have trust and faith in, because I think trust was shattered coming out of the Russia doping scandal. And we obviously want to be part of the solution to help restore that trust and that faith in the overall system. And an important part of being able to do that is having something as simple as the equipment that athletes and users can have trust and confidence in. So we certainly have set out to remedy that. And, we're going to do that. And we are doing that through the introduction of our sample collection product suite that is called the SAFE system. And the safe part of SAFE system is actually an acronym that is secure, athlete-friendly, functional, and efficient. And I think that provides pretty good insight into what we're trying to accomplish with our products. In addition to that, employing, advanced technologies that have unprecedented security features, anti-counterfeit, tamper-evident features into our equipment, including the NSF certification that we recently announced, are all things that I think very much help restore the trust that was lost coming out of the doping scandal in Russia.
And how does the SAFE system work exactly? Is there a specific key to open it, or will it give some kind of notice if a sample has been opened?
A little bit of combination of both. I mean, there's a specialized tool that the laboratory uses to be able to open samples. There's also kind of accessories, ancillary devices that we can provide to the laboratories that are able to, one, prove the authenticity of any kit that they receive, and two, also verify the sample hasn't been tampered with or broken into in any specific way. So, as we went through our research and development process to design the equipment, these were very, very important things that we needed to make sure we had answers to and be able to integrate into the equipment. And that is what we heard directly from athletes as well. And they were integral in the development of our product because we consulted with them and got their input and feedback at every step of the way, because they're ultimately the stakeholders in the process that are most impacted by the use of collection equipment. So, not only did we strive to make sure that the equipment was more secure and tamper evident and reliable, but also more user friendly, because I think anyone who's witnessed a sample collection that an athlete goes through, and an athlete can certainly tell you it's an awkward and invasive process, and it's a bit of an inconvenience, but arguably a necessary inconvenience. So we wanted to make sure we could do simple things to improve that experience just a little bit, make an awkward, invasive process a little less awkward, invasive was important to us, while ensuring athletes had complete trust and confidence in the equipment that their samples and ultimately their careers are secured in some ways. So yeah, we're excited about our product. We're excited about the trust and confidence that it instills in athletes through the collection process. And we think it is a great alternative to what else is out there and helps provide a path to restoring trust that was lost coming out of the scandals that we've seen.
It's definitely a great product. And you recently got the NSF International certification as well. I know it's a new product, but how many are on the market right now, and what's the goal?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we're a very young company. I mean, we established in 2020, started getting our equipment out into the field and into organizations' hands for use in early 2020. And a pandemic hit, and obviously that impacted us as it did everyone, particularly sports organizations in the sports world, ground to the halt for the better part of a year from there. So 2020 being an interesting year, we still had a lot of great progress and a lot of great adoption of our equipment. And we just surpassed the 30,000 kit mark that we've distributed out to the field. So we're really excited about that. You mentioned the NSF certification as well as another really important certification that we're really excited about. And that was a long process to get through the NSF certification just because of the rigor of testing that our product underwent to achieve that certification. And the NSF certification is essentially an independent verification that our products meet quality, performance, and functionality requirements as dictated by this new protocol that NSF has developed specifically for drug testing sample collection equipment. And I think that certification goes a long way to what we were just talking about, of making sure that athletes and users have the trust and confidence that they need in it, because it isn't just Innovero, saying that this is how great our product is, here are the things that it does. We've had it independently verified by a world-renowned organization who specializes in kind of the public health and safety space of ensuring commercial products do what they say they're supposed to do. And having that, I think importantly, the NSF piece also has recognition in the elite athlete, Olympic professional sports space already due to their work in the dietary supplement space and also verifying and certifying dietary supplement space. And that's in part of the reason why we went to NSF to develop this protocol and have our product certified, is that we knew athletes would recognize the certification, and I think by way of familiarity, they know what that mark means, and they know that it's a product that they can trust based off this certification. And Callum Skinner, Olympic gold medalist coming out of Rio, who's recently started doing some work for us, recently came out and said that athletes can now have trust in this specific part of the process because of this certification, and that a new benchmark has been set by NSF establishing this testing protocol, as well as by Innovero being certified to it. So I think it goes a long way in helping do what we're trying to do and secure global athlete trust with this. And as we talk about securing global athlete trust, and back to your original question, the intention is absolutely to get, our equipment and our product to, every major games that we possibly can, and every anti-doping organization that we possibly can. We feel strongly that we have a very strong and unique product that provides an unprecedented level of security and tamper evidence that we think, athletes around the world deserve to experience. So we're certainly working towards as widespread adoption of our equipment as we can.
You mentioned 30,000 kits right now in the market. Are you having any partnerships with any organizations at the moment?
Yeah, we've got great partnerships right now with the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency. We have great partnerships with Major League Baseball, the South African Anti-Doping Institute, the Chinese Taipei Anti-Doping Commission, and a number of other third-party collection agencies around the world that we're currently working with, just to name a few. Obviously, each country is, I think, a little bit different, just where they stand with their anti-doping efforts coming out of pandemic and sports resuming, and the comfort level and safety obviously being first and foremost, I think, before anti-doping efforts fully resume. But a lot of great discussions with organizations, and we've seen great interest and great adoption so far in 2021, which we're really excited about. And obviously the prospects going forward are very promising too.
This episode is sponsored by Insport Education, the online business school for sport. They offer a range of different courses, for example, Foundations of Sport Business, Private Equity in Sport, Sustainability in Sport, Sports Law, Introduction to Esports, and much, much more. As a listener to this podcast, you get 10% off all of their courses using the code SportsManagementPodcast10. Click the link in the description below and sign up today. On an earlier episode, I was talking to Phil from US Weightlifting, and they also take anti-doping very seriously. And I feel like more and more organizations are following this path.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think it's important for, trust and confidence in the overall anti-doping system. You have to have trust and confidence in each of the foundational elements of that. And I think sample collection equipment is a foundational element to the overall anti-doping system. And if trust and confidence is eroded in something as simple as the equipment, then the overall system suffers. So I think organizations are realizing the importance of having equipment that they can have total trust in.
Since this is the sports management podcast, I like to talk about leadership. So how big is your team at Innovero? And what would you say is your leadership style?
Yeah, being a young company, we're still relatively small. We've got a team of about 5 people right now that are working on the day-to-day operations, and that ranges, everything from business development to sales and marketing, operations, finance, partnerships, and compliance. I mean, no 2 days are the same, that's for sure. But being a young company and being a small company, I think my leadership style is highly collaborative, and I think it has to be for the success of the company. There isn't super specifically defined roles for any one employee or person right now. So the ability to be collaborative and be able to work together to focus on our overall mission and direction of the company is important. So, my leadership style right now is not just strategic, but also highly collaborative.
That makes a lot of sense. As you mentioned, you launched a startup in the middle of a pandemic. Is this the biggest bump on the road in your career this far?
I don't think anyone could plan for the biggest bump in the road, which was the pandemic. And I mean, that created, a lot of, I think, heartache and effort for a lot of people. And we're no different. Being a young company, there's going to be bumps in the road regardless. And you can't necessarily plan for those. And, launching a company in the first part of 2020, 2 months later, a pandemic hits that, impacts the whole world, as well as the sports industry and anti-doping industry. there were plenty of challenges and bumps in the road that we had to overcome. And I think you just have to be nimble. You have to be open to feedback. You have to be willing to be flexible when you encounter these bumps in the roads and roadblocks in some ways, and not be afraid to change course and be flexible and nimble. So yeah, it's a very interesting time and an interesting year, and it's promising that I think there's a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, and things are slowly starting to get back to some sense of normalcy. And I don't think as a young company or any company, you can navigate those without the ability to be nimble and flexible.
I agree with you. Maybe you had the toughest part in the beginning, and now it's just down road from here.
But that would certainly be welcome by me.
I'm sure it is. If we talk about you and your career, what did you study in school? How did you get into sports management? And how has it been from the start up until where you are today?
Yeah, certainly. I went to school. I was actually a history major. I played collegiate baseball for 4 years. So I was a student athlete, and then didn't really have any calling, I guess, so to speak, from, where I wanted to go career-wise. So I went back to graduate school and got a master's degree in sports management. And from there, and I think one of the last requirements of receiving a master's degree was to do a couple internships. And one of my internships was with the PGA of America, which is a nonprofit professional golfers association. So I got some really good experience in the sport management space early by way of internships, and primarily on the operations side of the house. And then once those internships wrapped up, I started looking for jobs in the sports industry and had some really good contacts that were living in Colorado Springs, where USADA is based, but also the U.S. Olympic Committee. So some introductions were made, and I ultimately landed at USADA for my first job coming out of school, and was able to, like I said earlier in the podcast, I think just get some wonderful experience, happy to have a job to start, and then just began taking every experience and opportunity I could get within the organization and learn, was able to grow a bit, and was open to trying new things, being a part of new things, getting outside of your comfort zone was something that I've always embraced, and I appreciated taking on new tasks. And I think that ultimately has paid dividends in my career of being able to take on new tasks and responsibilities that I haven't previously had a ton of experience in, to be able to learn and grow in a professional capacity. And that's worked out really well for me. And I've been fortunate. And, if it wasn't for, I think, that mindset and the opportunities that I was given at USADA, I probably wouldn't be in the position that I am today, leading and running a startup company. Because I think to do that, you've got to be willing to be outside of your comfort zone and take some tasks at hand that you necessarily haven't dealt with in the past.
You mentioned internships, and that has been a reoccurring topic on this podcast. Almost all guests on this podcast have encouraged people to go and do internships. It might not be exactly what you want, but it might lead you to something else later on.
Yeah, I mean, 1,000% agree. I mean, you've got to be willing to start somewhere, and internships tend to be where most people get their start. And it's a lot of people's first professional experience in any industry. And you quickly realize, I think, whether you like it or you don't like it. And it also provides you insights into what you may want to do in the future, or if you want to get into a totally different industry altogether. So it's a good way to get really valuable experience, not only for a potential future employer or, yourself, in the sense that I did this internship. I realized I didn't like the sports industry, and I want to go do something else. I mean, that's totally fair, and that's good. And that's why I think internships are very important, because it allows you to showcase your skills, but also it gives you the opportunity to realize, where your interests truly lie.
100%. You had a high position within USADA, working with the UFC and Premier Sports, as we have mentioned before. Leaving that for a startup could be considered as risky. Was that a difficult decision to make?
I saw it as a great opportunity. It wasn't an easy decision to make, but I thought it was such a good opportunity that I couldn't necessarily turn that down, because who knows what it was going to lead to. And the experience that I was going to get by being able to work and lead a startup, in my mind, is something that I always have wanted to do. So I had to jump at the opportunity, and I did. I left a very good position in working with, a big team with a lot of great people. Wasn't easy to do, But, being growth oriented and wanting to continue to grow in my career, this was a very, I think, logical step from a career path perspective that allowed me to do that.
How important was your trust in the product and the impact that you thought that would have in your decision to change to Innovero?
Yeah, it was the most important piece of my decision. I wasn't going to get associated with a company or an organization that I didn't have 1,000% trust in what the organization was trying to do or the products that were going to be offered. So, having the opportunity to review the product prior to taking the job was important and felt, 1,000% confident that this is a product I can stand behind with a lot of faith. So it was absolutely the defining kind of decision-making piece behind taking the Innovero opportunity.
That makes sense. We have talked about anti-doping and your work at USADA and now your current work at Innovero. Is there something that I haven't asked you that you feel is important to mention?
No, I don't think so. This has been really, really good, Marcus, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, both about my past experience and current experience. So I don't think there's anything more I need to talk about.
Okay, then it's just the last question that I ask everyone. It's if you could choose the next guest on the podcast, who do you think that I should talk to?
Being in the anti-doping space and being focused on innovation, I'd love to hear you interview someone who also works either in the sport integrity space or just in the sports space that, works for a company that is focused on a product in the marketplace that is innovative and game changing. So it'd be really good to hear other people's, insights and perspectives on how they approach innovation in the marketplace.
For sure. Maybe there is a competitor to Innovero out there somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's the beauty of, I think where the industry is right now. It's not just a one organization show anymore, and there is certainly competitors to Innovero that would be really interesting to hear how they're approaching it.
For sure. Gabe, Baida, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you, Marcus. I really appreciate it. Great to speak with you.
You too. Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. Also, feel free to leave a comment about what you thought about this episode. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com or hit me up on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram @sportmpodcast.